The whole point about these talks is for you, the member of the public, to interact with people who I admire and who have done extraordinary things in their lives, and in particular those whose life has been involved in China or the Chinese. That becomes a bonus. Simon Murray, although an Englishman with a bit of Greek blood and God knows what, is not particularly Chinese, but he has lived in Hong Kong for over 35 years, I think.
50.
50, all right. Just to make sure he's awake. And I'm going to ask him to ramble on a bit. I know that he will not stop if I don't stop him. So I'm going to ask him to telescope, perhaps just the most important parts of your life, to tell your audience what you have done that has been extraordinary, because we know that you came from nowhere, as it were, and yet you ended up with being quite a successful businessman and an extraordinary man who has lived life to the full. So tell us, where did this come from, and how did this start? And of course you wrote your very famous book, Legionnaire, which started off with you joining the Foreign Legion, and so perhaps that might be the cue at which you might want to start.
Am I standing up for this?
No, you don't. You can kneel down if you want.
Well, listen, having listened to that, we have a big miscommunication here, okay? He told me to come here and speak about anything you want, and I do not intend to speak about myself, so the program has changed. I'm not going to talk about the Foreign Legion. I have no intention of talking about the Foreign Legion. Unless anybody wants to join, I can get you in. I have a few bits of paper here. Please don't be frightened, I have very large handwriting. I thought I would just roam around a little bit, some issues. I have been in Hong Kong for about 51 years, and China, of course, during that time. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of my views, comments, grievances on a range of subjects, which will include China as well. I'm 76 years old, so I've reached that level of age where you can talk about anything you want, because nobody's listening anyway. So it doesn't matter. In fact, the other day, I was in New York talking to a group of bankers, and I've been talking, the mic broke down, and there was a bit of panic, and I said, I can handle this without the mic, don't worry. And if anybody in the back can't hear me, just put your hand up and I'll speak a little bit louder. After I'd been speaking for about 15 minutes, a guy at the back put his hand up, was waving it around, and I said, I'm so sorry, I'll speak a bit louder, you can't hear me. He said, no, I can hear you very well, but I'd be happy to change places with anybody who can't. So I'll talk a bit more about bankers. I've got a lot to say about bankers, not just because of that, but I will be talking about bankers later. So the Chinese, this is a China exchange, so a few things about China. One of the things that I have always was always disappointed me is the relationship between America and China. They've never actually had, in all their years, a head-on. They've been sort of indirectly involved in the Korean War on opposite sides and so on and so forth. But actually, they kind of quite like each other. The Chinese sent their kids to American schools. The Americans actually made a lot of investments in China. I would love to see a relationship between America and China become good, because it would be world peace forever and ever. Just imagine if China and America were hand in glove, thought the same, and did things together. I came across a little, it might be a long time before that happens, I came across a little snippet in the Herald Tribune not so long ago. I'll read it to you. It's a dinner speech by a man called Chinatown, and it's a dinner at the American Asiatic Association. This is word for word. This is Mr. Tao Tsai making his speech at dinner. The works of this American Asiatic Association has rendered China better understood by the Americans, and America better understood by the Chinese. One of the chief objectives of my mission here today is to promote this good understanding. It is an encouraging sign of the times that Americans are taking a much greater interest in what is going on in China than they did a little time ago. Date of that, 3rd of May, 1910. So we are making progress in getting the Americans and the Chinese together. But it's taken a little bit more time than we thought it would. Missed opportunities along the way, big missed opportunities along the way. In our time, in 1972, President Nixon went to China. He had no interest in China, didn't want to do anything in China, he just wanted to be the first American president to visit China. And he used the good services of his Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger. At that time, not well known to everybody, and this has been given to me by Henry Kissinger himself, so I think it's factual, Russia and China had been having a border war up in the Amur region for about 4 years, started in 1968. And Russia were about to press the button and blast China to smithereens, which they could have easily done in 1972. China had nothing. In 1970, 40 million Chinese died of starvation. They had no money, they had nothing, they had very, very little except an army with German Mauser out-of-date rifles. It would have been over in 10 seconds. They were ready to press the button. Nixon arrives in China. The Russians assumed that the Americans and the Chinese got something going. So we better hold this, we're going to hold this and see what's happening. The Chinese were eternally grateful to the Americans. Henry Kissinger is an absolute hero in China, mainly because of this happening in 1972. What a moment for China and America to get together. Good mates. The whole thing, by the way, was planned and aided by Pakistan. Everything went through Pakistan. So there was a good moment of the America-China to get together. There have been others, but it's sad that every time anything goes wrong in the States, anything goes wrong in the worldwide economy, anything goes wrong, it's China's fault. China is not far away, also pretty creepy. What happens in China is America's fault. China has today 109 million diabetics, increasing at the rate of 10 million a year. China's middle class has increased over the years, of course. They now have a middle class which is about 18% of the population, 18% of the population. That actually happens to be 270 million people. And of course, as middle class grows, people eat more, enjoy themselves more, blah, blah, blah. But it's not China's fault, it's America's fault, it's Coca-Cola and hamburgers. It isn't. It isn't. It's much more likely to be the fact that 700 million, big number, 700 million Chinese live in the rural areas on $2. They live on $2 a day. They eat 4 bowls of rice a day. 4 bowls of rice a day. But they work in the paddy fields. Over the last 10 years, is that me or you?
You.
I think that means. It didn't stop, does it?
No. Carry on.
700 million. Of those 700 million, 20 million a year for the last 10 years have been moving to the urban areas looking for jobs. Okay? They're in the factories. They're sitting on a lathe, sitting on a stool, working with their fingers, still eating 4 bowls of rice a day. Rice is very, very high glycemic, more sugar in rice than there is in ice cream, and do we wonder? They've got a huge problem, okay? Now, there's China blaming that on America, classic, as America blames everything on China. I'm moving from that to the little glance of the Middle East. Some of this stuff weeds itself in. The Middle East is a total mess today, and talking about friendships and partisans of melting loyalty. The Americans are perceived by many of their old friends as untrustworthy. I mentioned Pakistan. I've just been in Islamabad about 3 months ago. Used to be great, great friends of America, and now don't trust them at all. I think Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, who depend on America for a response if they get attacked by a nuclear weapon, are today wondering whether the Americans would respond. If North Korea attacks South Korea, there is a deal, a proxy deal, and the Americans will come to their aid. When you get hit by a nuclear bomb, first of all, you want to make sure you are the first who uses a nuclear bomb. It's very bad firing back, okay? So the Americans will be there. Yes, we're going to talk about this. Sorry you've been hit, and in whatever it is, Osaka. What's that? They're threatening another one. Don't you worry too much. We'll be on it. It's just got to get it through Congress, and we'll be right there. That's the feeling that they have. Within no time, Japan will have a nuclear bomb. They're not going to sit there and look at North Korea 100 yards away and say, we're going to wait for America. They will have a nuclear bomb. When they have a nuclear bomb, China will go absolutely bonkers. You can imagine that. But that's what's going to happen. So the great nuclear proliferation agreement is about to be destroyed. Saudi Arabia, they have no bomb at the moment. The Americans have done a lot of handshaking agreements with Iran. Saudi Arabia are very, very upset, as you might imagine, and they see this as a changing loyalties. Saudi Arabia will have a bomb. America will stop them, try to stop North Korea. North Korea got a bomb from Pakistan and Cuba, Malaysia, all negotiated in Dubai. Saudi will do the same thing. So what is happening in the Middle East today, at the end, we read about it every day. At the end, it's Sunnis versus Shia. That's what's going to happen. So Saudi Arabia versus Iran. What happens in the middle? What happens in Syria and Lebanon and whatever, and Libya and all those? What happens? What is going to happen is Saudi Arabia versus Iran, Shia versus Sunni. That is just a question of time, and nothing is going to stop it, because the only people who could have stopped it have already jumped ship in a way and gone over to Iran. I love Iran. I think the Persians are terrific. What was I doing in Iran in 1978? Just before the revolution, I was selling whiskey. Good people. They know what they're doing over there. Nice people. But. So I think we have some problems in the Middle East, and I'm afraid I blame the Americans for sitting on the fence and jumping around, and I blame the Americans for not trying to make it with China. Would have been so easy, I think. The world economy today, just touching on that, we are sitting on this. If you go to Europe, there's a dreadful smell of deflation. Deflation. Now, when you think of deflation, we sort of think, oh yeah, grapes are off, 1929, California, all terrible, blah, blah, blah. When I was younger, inflation was a poisonous word. The evil of the world was inflation. God, you've got inflation. Terrible, terrible word. In 1917, the Germans had 4 Deutschmarks to the pound. In 1923, that's 6 years later, 50,000 Deutschmarks to the pound. That is inflation. 50,000 Deutschmarks for a loaf of bread. When we were kids, just after the war, we all had 50,000 Deutschmark things in our tin boxes. The Germans understand inflation. Argentina understands inflation. In 1946, the end of the war, Argentina was the richest country per capita in the world. They had been on both sides, on everybody's side. They fed beef to everybody. They were out of it. In 1946, the world owed Argentina $4 billion. Not very much by today's standard, a lot of money in those days. And what did they do? In 1951, they forgave the debt that the world owed them. So statues going up all over Buenos Aires of Mr. Perón and his wife Eva Perón and so on. Wonderful, wonderful, etc. 1956, that's 5 or 6 years later, Argentina had inflation at 1,000%. 1,000%. In 1956. In 1958, Argentina was absolutely bust. They didn't even have the money to pay the paper for the banknotes. I arrived in 1958 in Argentina on a boat. Absolute nightmare. People running around, fires going off, guns going off. Actually, it was terrific, but it was exciting, but that was Argentina. When you think about inflation and so on, and these things, we are told every day we have to have inflation. We need inflation, we need inflation. When the oil price went up from $3 to $12, some of you may not remember, some of you will remember, $3 to $12, $12, what is $12? That's not very much, it's actually a 400% increase. The world went mad. I was in London at the time, 1973, we had 27% inflation, 19% interest rates. Everybody was screaming. Today, price of oil has just gone down 70%. Energy costs have gone down, and we are all screaming. What are we saying? Instead of saying this is the best thing that ever happened in years, this is China's fault. China, again, China has, oh God, China is, growth is falling, China's coming for a hard knock and all this. China's growth is 6.7%. Everything in life is a comparison. When you have a cup of coffee in the morning in a restaurant, it tastes better or worse than the one you had the day before. It's a nice day today because it was raining yesterday. This country, this football game, everything you see, everything you do in life is a comparison. You see a lovely girl coming down the road, why is she a pretty girl? Because in your brain, you've got a whole lot of them. Stop there, and by comparison, she's very nice. So everything is a comparison. So we compare China's growth, 6.7%, with Europe's growth, 1%, maybe, American growth, I think it's 2%. And don't forget China's growth today is on an economy much, much bigger than it was 20 years ago when they were growing at 25%. So 25% of an apple is one thing, 26% of a grapefruit is something else, okay? So actually China's not doing so badly. It has hundreds of problems. I've just touched on one of them, and that was the diabetes problem. That's minuscule compared to some of their other problems. But China is not the cause of commodity prices falling, and the price of prices falling is a very good thing. We know why the prices of commodities are falling. Started with oil. Saudi Arabia wanted to keep their market share, 9.4%. They were losing it to the new boys coming into the market, to fracking and gas. What we'll do is we will get our market share back by increasing production. Saudi Arabia is the central bank of the oil market in the world. Increase production. What happens? Price goes down. Fantastic. 70%. Hundreds of people are out of business and so on. But Saudis have maintained their market share. And because they are so bright and so intelligent, at the end of the year, 18 months, they discovered that they had sold the most oil at the lowest price. Isn't that weird? You've lost $60 billion. Christ. We've got to do something about that. They are going to, according to the newspapers, they are going to go public with Aramco, their oil company, at the lowest price of oil in 30 years. How bright is that? But anyway, they're going to do that. Saudi Arabia has an agreement with its population. We, the king, we own the oil, we own everything. We go on holiday, $3 million a night, with 747s and our family and so on. You get free accommodation, you get free food, free healthcare, and free education. Are we clear? Yes, we're clear. But now, because we've just lost 60 billion, we're going to tax you. Saudi Arabia are going to tax their own people. What do you think that will do? That will increase the number who want to sign up for Al-Qaeda by 20% overnight. That's what's happening in Saudi Arabia. That's what's happening in the Middle East. I want to talk a little bit about, so commodities, just to finish on commodities, who has benefited from the falling commodity prices over the last 2 or 3 years? China. China has benefited to the tune of $657 billion. China imports 37% of most commodities in the world. That 670, whatever it is 50% of that is from cheap oil prices. So China has benefited more than anybody else. Okay? I just want to talk about the banking industry for a couple of seconds. Okay? The banking industry I am pretty grievous about. They were the great industry of times of yore. They had a very easy time of it. In England, when I was brought up, just after the war, there were 4 banks. 4 principal banks were Barclays, Midland Bank, NatWest, and Lloyds. Had a total cartel. I went to Manchester in 1958, and I opened my first bank account. With some money given to me by my uncle, 60 quid, 60 pound note. Midland Bank. Midland Bank had a rather nice address in Manchester, not London, 100 King Street. Good address. I was sent down there. The manager of the bank came down to see me. Midland Bank was the biggest bank in the world. In 1958 was also the biggest company in the world. Beat your heart out, Henry Ford, all those guys, forget it. Midland Bank was the biggest company in the world. The managing director is sitting in front of me. I'm an 18-year-old boy. This is what banking, this was bankers in the old days. He gave me electron overdrafts. Like, I didn't know what an overdraft was. I thought somebody left the window open. Otherwise, it was a very nice discussion. The banks were great. Who poisoned the banks? Sorry about this. The Americans, again. I've got it into the Americans a little bit. I hope there aren't too many Americans here. But I'm trying to balance the China thing. The banks, the investment banks, were invented in America. We called them merchant banks. I was in London in 1973. Merchant bank would invite you to lunch, you've got a deal, you've got some idea, you want to do something, listen to it over lunch in the club. We like that, we're going to put a bit of money in there, and we're going to raise some money from somebody else. That's what they did. Investment banks in America sell products, nice products, like consolidated debt obligations, and I can't remember half of them, but sort of subprime mortgage-backed securities, all these lovely things that we like, and we can insure the whole thing with credit default swaps and all these. Okay, this is what they were selling in the city of London, and in places like Hong Kong, where the average CEO didn't even know what they were talking about, and they bought all these wonderful things, and nearly bankrupted the world in 2008. Tang wants to give you my great quotation on banking. In America, in the old days, they were only allowed to operate in their own states, not outside their states, nor were they allowed to be involved in investment banking. Glass-Steagall kept them apart. This is a quotation which I quite like. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to this country than standing armies. And if we allow the banks and the companies that grow up around the bank to get control of our currency, first by deflation, then by inflation, as they're doing now, they will destroy the value of all property until our children wake up homeless in this country, conquered by our forefathers. Well, that's quite a perceptive guy. That is Mr. Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson, in 1802. You will remember there are thousands of people today in America who do not live in their houses, do not own their homes anymore because of the great mortgage-backed securities and so on. Many of them are living in tents in villages. You don't believe me? Go and have a look. That's what they did. Very nearly bought the house down. So I'm pretty upset with bankers, and not just because they, what happened in New York the other day, but bankers, I have a problem with them. I want to just say one other, maybe one other thing. Just back on energy. To give you a feel about energy, why this drop in oil prices is fantastic boom for us. It may not be good for BP, a lot of things are not good for BP, and it may not be good for Shell and Total or even Exxon and so on. I'm sure we all feel very sorry for them, but there are other things in life, and they've had a very, very, very good time. Saudi production costs are $3, and they sell to the oil companies, and you know what price your petrol is and so on. Oil. Here is something I'm going to end with this. This is China. This is a Stanford Business School kind of equation. If you took all the energy producing substances in the world and got rid of them and only had one, that's oil. Coal, gas, nuclear, everything else, forget it. Only oil. The energy required today to make the world function is 3.6 cubic miles of oil. What is 3.6 million? What is a cubic mile of oil? Think of a swimming pool, 1 mile long, 1 mile wide, easy. 1 mile deep, not so easy. That's about 1,000 swimming pools stacked on top of each other. So a cubic mile of oil is quite a lot of oil. We use 3.6 cubic miles if we only used oil. Okay? That's an interesting equation. By 2035, we will need the equivalent of 9 cubic miles of oil. And to give you a feel for what we're doing in solar and windmills and all this stuff where we place our money, 1 cubic mile of oil is equal to the equivalent of 200 Three Gorges dams in China. Quite a lot of oil. 1 cubic mile is equal to 4.6 billion rooftop solar panels. To produce 1 cubic mile oil, we would have, equivalent with solar panels, we would have to build 4.5 billion, that's a B, 4.5 rooftop panels a day for 50 years. What am I telling you? Rooftop panels whistle for it. The windmills whistle for it. Even the Dutch learned that several centuries ago. Waste of time. There's only one way forward on the energy subject, and that is China. But who is going for their lives on it? China. And France. France is 85% fired by nuclear today. There's another subject. I've covered quite a lot of subjects. Given the Americans a bit of a bash, I actually quite like the Americans, they're right. I'm not sure that they're as friendly. Maybe I should ask one word on Brexit. Can I have 2 more minutes?
Yes.
Brexit, the great Brexit. We are hearing how terrifying it is, and I think Cameron said this morning, we're heading for World War III, and so on. The reason there has been no World War III has got nothing to do with the European Commission. It's got to do with the fact that the American and British Army have stationed troops in Germany since the war. That's why there has been no war. Nothing to do with European. If I ask any of you, I'm not going to, but if I did ask you, the difference between the EU and the European Commission, some of you might have a problem explaining to me. If I asked you to give me 4 members of the European Parliament or the European Commission, some of you might have a problem explaining to me. We're told that they'll stop trading with us. Fact, at the Battle of Waterloo, Napoleon was wearing boots made in Northampton. Not my fault. It's true. They won't stop. They'll trade more with us. They'll trade more with us. And they do you think the Americans trade with Europe? Why can't we trade with Europe? And if they say we're not going to buy your boots, well, fine, we won't buy your wine. How's that? We buy from them far more than they buy from us. Okay? We have nothing to fear from getting our country back. Doing our own laws, having our own human rights. Do you think there aren't any British human rights? Good Lord. And our judges, when we send somebody to jail or send them back to his own country, that doesn't get overruled by Europe. We can build fences around our swimming pools to whatever height we want. We can have budgetary guards with cages, but we aren't dictated to by the EU. And the space between school desks, actually, I think we can do that on our own without Europe. And most of Europe in the Commission, who are these guys? Name some of them. Prodi, these are guys who've been rejected by their own countries. How did they get in the Commission? We didn't put them there. Somebody sent them there. Been rejected by their own country, end up in the Commission. I've been there. I've seen them. Been there. I went there. They asked me to speak at a meeting there, and I was told I would be speaking at 10 o'clock. I left at 1 o'clock because I had to catch a plane. I hadn't spoken. I sat next to Ian Duncan-Smith the other day. He said his first meeting in the European Parliament, there were about 120 people there, and they were all talking one by one. And then finally it came his turn to speak. And he said in that sort of way, that deprecating way, after listening to an hour and a half speeches, he said, well, I'm still alive. Unfortunately, there was a bad translation, and it came over as, I'm terminally ill. And Mrs. Merkel came up to him, put her arms around him and said, I'm so sorry, Iron. She kept calling him Iron. So sorry, Iron, it's so awful. And she then got up to speak, and as she started to speak, the president of Cyprus, who was sitting next to Duncan Smith, fell off to sleep, and it was okay, he slept, it was fine, no problem. Then he started to snore very loudly, so he woke him up. And the president of Cyprus thought it was his turn to speak, grabbed the mic and started talking. Across Merkel, who he thought was doing the translation for him. So it went on for quite a long time. I think I'll end there, although I get ticked off. I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, there's so much information there. I mean, probably the audience thinks, how do you put anything together? So I'm going to narrow some of the issues so that we can get it on a manageable scale. The second last thing you said was about energy, which of course is a very important subject. And you're a champion of oil, which we understand, the cubic mile is the depth of that mine, which is mind-boggling.
Yes.
It's not the width, it's the depth. It's like Loch Ness. It's very deep. You can hold, apparently, 7 times the world population in Loch Ness, 49 billion people, because of its depth.
The ice in Antarctica is 3 miles deep. Imagine that. Just a lot of ice.
Now, you skirted over slightly nuclear, because you also mentioned it, that France was going for the guns and nuclear, but presumably nuclear is an alternative energy in the world tomorrow.
It's the cleanest, it's expensive to set it up, but if you switch from uranium to thorium, which is another substance that they are doing now, take away all the toxic waste, yeah, I think it's fine. Yes, how many people have died in the nuclear energy business in America in the last 50 years? Yeah, we have.
That's why China is so keen, isn't it? It's got 37 nuclear power stations in China already in building, and they want to build more. And in the last statement said that was the top of the agenda. China wants more nuclear power stations and be able to build more power stations outside of China as well. That seems sensible.
I'm building.
Are you? and going back to Saudi Arabia as well. Saudi Arabia, can we have another bottle of water for Mr. Murray? Saudi Arabia, I mean, isn't the main problem of Saudi Arabia that they practice this Wahhabism that preaches fundamental Islam, and that is the cause of all the problems of people being radicalized and being fundamental, and that seems to me to be one of the most evil things that they can export, and having exported it for the last 50 years. Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. Sorry, what are you saying about Saudi Arabia?
About their teaching, the kind of Muslim with what they call Wahhabism, which is the fundamentalist kind, which is the kind that characterized by ISIS and all those extreme terrorists.
I'm afraid you're right. Al-Qaeda was formed in Saudi Arabia by a member of the Bin Laden family, one of the richest families in Saudi Arabia. That is a guy who says, this isn't fair, you've got everything, and the people have nothing. That's what that is. That's a haves and have not. It's not about religion, it's about haves and have not, who owns this, who owns that. And but religion is the thing that you lay on top to make it good, to make it, bring the boys in. It's religion, it's got, 23 virgins or whatever it is, all that's all supplemental stuff for getting people in. But it's about haves and have nots.
I don't want to forget to ask you to tell at least one anecdote on Li Ka-shing, who's the richest man in Asia. And so I want you to tell it before I forget. And I think we know the favourite one of his mother in the funeral parlour. So will you tell everybody, and I'm sure everybody knows who Li Ka-shing is, and that you worked for him for how many years? 21 years?
Yeah, no, 10 years actually.
10 years you ran Hutchison, you founded Orange and so forth, and you are still very dear to him. Tell us your anecdote, which I find quite amusing, quite endearing in a way. And this is the kind of man you worked for 10 years. And I suspect you have not worked for another man for 10 years, nor have you ever worked for a man more than 10 years.
I never worked for 10 years. Li Ka-shing is a very, very, very lovely guy, and he's one of those people I've met at a fork in the road in my life, plenty of them, who have been hugely, hugely helpful to me, and so I love him to distraction. But he is very amusing, unintentionally sometimes, and he is probably one of the only people in Hong Kong whose English gets progressively worse by the day. So we did have a few translation problems, and there are one or two anecdotes. I suppose we once, when we were coming up towards 1997, and the handover, he was a little bit worried about that in 1990, and said to me, Simon, I'm worried about a handover. I think we've got to get out of here and get some business in the UK. So I went over to the UK to look around for something for us to invest in. And my eyes alighted on a lovely, lovely company which owns the newspapers, it owned the Financial Times, it owned the Economist, it owned Royal Doulton China, it owned Madame Tussauds. It just had lots and lots of very easy, manageable assets, publishing. So I thought we will buy a little, I forgot what it's called. Pearson's. We'll buy into Pearson's. So we put about 60 million quid into Pearson's and very slowly bought stock in Pearson's so that we wouldn't upset anybody and so on. When you get to 5%, the rule is you have to announce. So we announced that we had 5% in Pearson. Now, KS's problem was he could never remember the word and the name Pearson. You know when you read a Russian novel, you get to the end, okay, what was the name of the hero? Well, I don't know what the name of the hero was, Boblovsky or something. Unless you read aloud, you just see that word coming out, and every time he's the hero, that's it. You don't remember his name. Chinese have problems with our names, we have problems with their names. This is Mr. Li Ka-shing. I know what you're talking about. Anyway, I know who he is. So, KS had a problem with Pearson. And every time we had a board meeting, there was a board director whose name was Pearson. And he used to say to me, "Simon, what the name of this person?" Pearson. Oh yeah, Mr. Pearson. And then talk. Never could he remember Pearson. And he used to say to me in the morning, sometimes he'd ring me up, "Simon, what happened now with the Pearson?" Yeah, the Pearson case. What happened with the Pearson case? Well, we're now up to 4% case. We got to advance pretty soon. So we announced eventually that Li Ka-shing, who nobody had heard of in Europe, had bought 5% of Pearson and was obviously on the rampage to buy Pearson. What? Pearson, Financial Times, and this, that, and the other. Who the hell is this Li Tak-twat stuff? And Mr. Simon Murray trying to take over England. It's absolutely outrageous. We got really, really awful. Anyway, we tried to improve the PR, and we slipped a couple of bucks to Mrs. Thatcher for her re-election. Back which we got an invitation to lunch at number 10, Downing Street, along with 10 others. So we're at this lunch, and Mrs. T is sitting in the middle, and there's the head of BP, the head of BT, head of this, the head of that, all the boys. And KS is right in the middle, the only Chinese guy in the room, right opposite Mrs. T, and I'm down one end, down the far end, where I should be, and that's that. And we're talking about everything, and we get to the coffee, and Mrs. T says, "Well, I love to have these lunches 2 or 3 times a year. I want to hear what you people think of the way I'm running the country, and what we should be doing, and what we should not be doing." Well, there's a total silence. And she said, "Well, now come along. Somebody's not the ball rolling." And to my amazement, KS dived in. And he said, "Mrs. Thatcher, Prime Minister, I like to say right away that you're doing a really nice job." "Yeah, and I like the way you got rid of the unions now, no more unions, really nice. And now already started to make one investment in the UK, already invested, I think, maybe 100 million pounds in the UK. Well, Mr. Lee, that's wonderful. And what's the name of the company you've invested in?" "Simon, what a name of that company!" They all was up, they couldn't imagine they were going to invest $100 not know what it invested in. So that's
all right, let's have a few questions from the floor. Who would like to ask? Yeah.
It's not really relevant, but you mentioned Argentina, you mentioned Cyprus. Sorry. I say it's not really relevant, but you mentioned Argentina and Cyprus. Have you ever thought how many public holidays various countries have? I did a little recce on it. We have 8. Most people have between 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Argentina has 16. Cyprus has 19. Is there equality there?
Is there a connection there? I think, yeah, probably.
Well, I mean, maybe Cyprus doesn't achieve it
Don't
all.
forget they were the richest country in the world at one time per capita. So indeed, were we, in 1912, UK, per capita, richest country in the world. Today, China, second biggest economy in the world, per capita, not even in the 100, the first 100. Does that matter? Yes, it does. There's a cake on the table. 2 of you are going to eat it. That's half each. 10 of you are going to eat it. You're only going to get 10%. per capita.
The second highest GDP per capita in the world is Macau.
Is what?
Macau,
Per capita.
per capita, yeah.
Could I just add that Sri Lanka, I think, has 25 per year, including 1 per month for their Poya days. So 25, I think, has got to be a world record.
Well, we have
And of course the French have the 8th of May forever as a holiday. We had it once,
We
because
have
they got the board, didn't
we
we?
have Saturday and Sunday off. Dubai doesn't. Sorry.
Yes, go on.
Excuse me. One quick question on China. Everybody talks a lot about in the press about what's going wrong in China, but nobody talks about what's going well in China.
Yes.
What I'd like to understand is what's on the ground, what's happening. Are people actually doing well? What's the reality on the ground?
Well, that's quite a big question. I've just told you that 110 million have got diabetes, which leads to lots of other things as well. The government pays 58% of all health care. So people are suffering. They have massive non-performing loans, huge non-performing loans. A friend of mine in the Bank of China the other day told me over lunch, it's just incredible, he can't believe it, and so on. Does that matter? China is, like other people, has brought bank interest rates down, so you've got massive borrowings and debt. They have a strange attitude towards it. The land is owned by the government anyway. 75% of the loans are done by government banks. There are 4 banks that prop up the whole system, and all the other banks, one of the Bank of China and the other Bank of Construction, and so on. So when you lend money to somebody to build a house on a piece of land, this is Chinese philosophy, you lend them $100 and they go bust. You get the land and the house back. Haven't just made the land back, but made a house on top of it. Rather strange sort of philosophy about lending and getting back. What they should be looking at is cash flow. Cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. Beware of companies in China that have high profits and no cash flow. They do have huge, huge problems on the debt side. They used to have, but I mean, again, comparison, America in 2003, debt probably 2 trillion. Today, very nearly 20 trillion. China reserves 3.5 trillion. Reserves. America, 20 trillion. Debt. Hello? Imagine that.
Debt in China?
What?
Debt in China?
Well, they've got the reserve. I don't know what the debt is, and that's the trouble.
It was 2.5 times
They say it's 350%. 3%, no, I think less than that of GDP, but I don't know, and I'm not even sure that they know.
That's why when you say 6.7% and so on, that's why. I mean, can we trust these figures? That's the problem, isn't it, for China?
My Chinese friend, like the head of Huawei, pretty smart guy, he says it's 3 or 4. Do we care? It's still 4 times 0.
Yes.
And it's a bit more difficult looking after 1.5 billion people than it is looking after 65 million in this country.
Thank you for your insights. I think I'm actually very glad that I managed to follow most of your thoughts throughout all these topics. But my question is related to solution.
To what?
Solution. Because coming from your background and your success, I just wonder, is there any solution that we can learn, from the experience of Li Ka-shing, for example, because they don't put a lot of debt on the family, dynasties, and you mentioned about debt, which might be one of the biggest problems of our world. Is there any solution to that?
I'm not sure about it.
He's saying, can you tell him the secret of how Li Ka-shing has become so bloody rich? He ran his company for 10 years.
That's a good headline question.
Share out your secrets.
I would have thought the answer was fairly obvious. It is basically the people who he's employed. He's wide open. When I met him, he was a property man, property. How did he become a property man? From selling plastic flowers and watch straps, because his father-in-law owned the factory that made the watch straps, the flowers. And he became the managing director of the company. Excellent. He sold the company and the building to Swire. Could not believe what he sold it for. He sold it for 40 times what the business was worth, the property, and he became a property man. And when everybody was running away from property in 1972, the Hong Kong stock market index was 1770. It went down to 152 in 6 months. That's a 91% drop. The horizon was black with people running for the airport. Suicide rate went up, I don't know what. Actually, a friend of mine jumped out the window and landed on something. He was very lucky. But KS stayed, and KS invested. It's easy to invest in a way, if banks are lending, when you have little to lose. He had much less to lose in those days. Okay? Then when I arrived, I'm not taking the credit for it, it was his idea to get in the energy business. Somebody gives him spiel over breakfast about oil. I went over to Husky, bought the oil company in Canada. Terrific, certainly at that time. We bought we boosted the container terminal business. He had no interest in the container terminals. Okay? We boosted that. We bought the Felixstowe container terminal. We bought the Shanghai container terminal.
And they're mobile.
Today, Hutchison owns 23% of all the container terminals in the world, including Panama and so on. 23%. We went much bigger into retail, parking shop. Well, no interest in him at all. Today, they are the 4th largest retailers in the world. Hutchison. Went into the telephone business. No interest at all in the telephone business. The first time we were in the telephone business, we had an office in Brussels, in Belgium.
Brussels.
In Bristol.
Bristol City.
An office in Bristol. We had sent a satellite up. We had sent a satellite up in China. When we went to launch the satellite, I said to KS, you've got to come up to China, we're going to launch a satellite next week. Who's coming from the Hong Kong government? I said, nobody is coming from the Hong Kong government. There is no interest, and I have invited nobody from the Hong Kong government. It's got nothing to do with it. What you should be asking me, KS, is who's coming from the Chinese government? Who's coming from the Chinese government? Li Peng will be there. Li Peng, I'm coming. So we launched this satellite. Later, we were using the satellite for telephone image and also for television. We started Star TV. But the telephone, so I'm in the Bristol office with KS to do the first telephone call on a telephone about twice as big as that, the original ones. Okay, KS, what I'm going to do, I'm going to dial, and you are going to make a telephone call, the first telephone call on this satellite. Sorry, man. I don't believe the telephone call on a satellite. KS, look. So Rick Siemens, who was our manager of our telephone business, Rick, take the telephone, go into the room next door, and KS is going to telephone you. I'm going to dial the phone. KS, you're making the first telephone call on a satellite. Make it. Hello? Hello? Wick? Wick, is that you? Hello, Wick? Hello? Hello, Wick. Fine. Rick comes back into the room. Simon, I don't believe this. I can hear him through the wall. Yes.
Could you compare and contrast India and China in terms of their economy and prospects?
Yeah, that's a good question and a question that is passed around all the time. And one minute we're all growing for India, terrific, 9% growth increase, and the next minute it slows down because something's happened and so on. The problem with India, for me, it is very, very, very sluggish. It is also very, I'm sorry about this if anybody takes that, it is also hugely corrupt, and everything takes a massive length of time, almost for a different reason to Japan. Now, China also has corruption problems, and as we know, and Mr. President Xi has already got 300,000 members of the party in front of the beak at the moment, who are not necessarily on trial, but being investigated and so on. China, incidentally, people of China think it's terrific. Members of the party may not think it's terrific, but the people of China. For me, China is racing. India goes in jumps, leaps. Very good on technology, India. Super techie guys, quite good on things like healthcare, they understand that sort of stuff. But you want to build a railway from A to B in India, maybe prepared for a 20-year wait before you get an answer on it. That's my problem with India.
There's also the car system, which is entrenched there, isn't it? Still.
Yeah, it's been there a long time. I mean, it doesn't exist. When you drive into India, you probably die. You drive into Calcutta or whatever it is, or Bombay, mile after mile after mile, slums and stuff. And Mumbai is an absolute mess. The buildings are all garbage because the landowners or the people who own the buildings don't want to clean them up. People who rent them. It's just got a soggy feeling about it. And they advertise every day on television, lovely India, and it's great to have a holiday.
Okay, 1 minute.
Yes?
Robin, and then you, and then lady.
Hello, Simon. Lovely to see you again. Thank you for a really inspiring talk.
You really can.
20 years, I think. I just wanted to ask you a question on a completely different topic, but I think it might be of interest to others, based on your exploits, which were far too modest to mention, French Foreign Legion and also walking to the South Pole. I just had this memory from about 23 years ago when we were at lunch with David at his country home in Hong Kong. And I very foolishly accepted an invitation after lunch when you asked if anyone would want to accompany you on a run. And I was about 3 stone lighter, more than 20 years younger, and at a peak of fitness, but within seconds, I think you disappeared out of sight. And about an hour later, you very kindly, but rather embarrassingly, sent out a search party to see if I'd fainted of heat stroke. And my question is simply, what do you do today to keep fit?
Well, actually,
and healthy?
That's an interesting question. The answer is nothing, because a year ago, 2 years ago, I had an operation on my left knee, and I couldn't do very much for that. And then last year, I had an operation on my right knee. That's from too much running, okay, and jumping up and down. But they're both feeling pretty good today, so I'm starting out again this year. I'm going to walk in the mountains in Iran this year. 2 years ago was Algeria, and 3 years ago was Morocco. And so I like trekking up mountains. Good for you. Too much running, not so good. Yeah, I remember. That's a good memory. I haven't seen you said something. Somebody saying that. When we were in the Foreign Legion, we were very fit, okay? Very fit indeed. And I was going to say something. Although I gave the bank as a bit of a bash, I was a chairman of Deutsche Bank for 3 or 4 years in Asia, so I have been a banker. Okay? In fact, I'm the first guy in the world, I think, to go to the Foreign Legion and then a bank. Most legionnaires go to the bank first, and then they go to the Foreign Legion. If you see what I mean.
What was the famous piece of advice the chairman of Deutsche Bank gave you on the first day you joined?
When I arrived at the bank, Deutsche Bank, this is not bad for a German bank, he said, right, Murray, let me explain to you, in this bank there are 2 groups of people.
This is the chairman himself.
What?
This is the chairman of the whole bank. What was his name?
Chairman of Deutsche Bank.
My
My first meeting. Murray, we've got 2 groups of people in this bank. There is the first group which does the work, and there is a second group that grabs the credit. If I was you, I would join the first group, less competition.
Yes.
You spoke a minute ago about railways and railroads built by the Chinese. Could you give us an insight into their aspirations in Africa?
Yeah. I think the Chinese are playing quite a lot on the colonial background of Africa. We are not like those guys. We are coming here to help you. And they've done a lot of deals where we'll build a road for you, we'll build a railway for you, and we'll build this for you, and do that for you, and you give us the mining rights or the oil rights, and so on. And it's very, very good. I think it's very good philosophy. But they have to be careful. When you are in the mining business, I've been in the mining business in Africa, one of the mistakes China has made is buying mines and then bringing over Chinese people to work the mines. So the African is standing there saying, I'm standing here, you are using Chinese labor to build the mine, and we're still out of a job. That's bad, and China has learned from that, I think, a little bit. But their philosophy of We build railways and all the rest of it, which they have an interest as well, because those railways are bringing the commodities, the minerals from the mine to the toast. So it's in everybody's interest. I think they've done pretty well. They're losing, they've calmed down a little bit, I think. Maybe push over quite what they thought. And the mining business is tough in social terms. Imagine we are Glencore, we're a mining business. We are one of the biggest copper mines in the world, right in the middle of the Congo. Okay. Now, we pay royalties to the government, and that's it, goes to the government, and they disperse the royalties. So we're paying our due, but the royalties are not going to the people around the mine. They're going to their favorite people, their tribes, or indeed they may be going to their pockets and turning up in a mansion in Saint-Tropez. So you've got people living on gold mines, copper mines, gold mines, who get no benefit at all. So we would build hospitals, we build schools, we build this, but we're already paying water dollars in terms of the payments we make on the product, the royalty paid product, but it isn't going into the mine where the people live. Tragedy when you see it.
This is a question I'd much like to know, actually, more personal. Having lived in Hong Kong, or worked in the East in Hong Kong for 50 years, he says, how's your Chinese?
How's my Chinese?
Yeah, do you speak Chinese well after all
Don't
that
go
time?
on,
Very, very good. Very good. Swear in Chinese.
Be very careful with questions like that. And I've got a very, very bad Fujian dialect, which makes it difficult.
So you do speak Chinese, that's jolly good.
I speak Thai. I speak German, I speak French, I speak English.
Right.
What a nasty country.
That person, then you.
How did you end up working for Li Ka-shing? Did you approach him? Did he approach you? Did he buy Davenham and you came with it? Or how did it happen? This was very unusual at the time, I guess.
I had a very small company, my own company. I left Johnny Matheson.
Yeah.
I worked for 14 years for Johnny Matheson. And then I went and started my own business. And KSD was firing his CEO and his CFO and his COO all in one day. And somebody rang me up, a friend of mine, who's a friend of his, and said, Murray KS is looking for a guy to run Hutchison, CEO. And I said, well, there's only one guy on the planet who can do that. That's me, jokingly. And he said, that's what we thought, Murray. Come and have a drink with KS tonight. No, I can't. I've got something on tonight. What about tomorrow? Tomorrow is Saturday. I'm playing golf tomorrow. Well, what about Monday, Sunday, Monday? Yeah, Monday I'll be fine. But no, Murray, you've got to come now. Now. Okay, I will come for one drink. So it was Friday, 5 o'clock. I got over to his office about 5:30. I had sold 49% of my business to Rothschild. So KS is sitting there. So we'd like you to be the CEO of the Hutchison. Okay, I'm really honored and it's so wonderful, but I can't because I had my own business and it's 49% owned by Rothschild, who told me they will never sell. So I'm on everything for sale. Just the price, call him, tell him, well, yeah, call him, I mean, call him, tell him, no, 9 o'clock in London, can call. Dial on the speakerphone, got Michael Richardson, managing director of Rothschild. Michael, you'll never believe what's happened. KSD wants to buy the company. Knowing he's going to say never. He didn't. He said, really? How much? So, he's a seller. So we bought the company to KS and I became the CEO. Quite a good move. That was as simple as that.
Yes, not over there.
I knew him. Johnny Mustang ran their engineering business, so I had sold lifts and air conditioning, all that rubbish. So he knew me.
The gentleman there and then the lady in front.
Thank you. Just we're talking about the US and China, and what's your view on the sort of South China Sea situation with everybody roaming around between the Americans, Philippines, Taiwan, the Chinese?
Yeah, it's good. I have to say, I have to say, and this is not why I'm grateful. On 4 years ago, I was on this. Okay, 4 years ago, telling my American friends, I'm rubbish. Wait a minute, the Chinese are really building up there, we're going to make something out of this. Having said that, I do not think it leads to anything like a war. There's just too little there. They're on an island. They're putting some stuff on an island. They've got, but no, they're not building nuclear warheads or anything like that. There are a lot of islands around there. If you go to the Japanese, everybody's got a claim to them. But when they had them, or thought they had them, what did they do on those islands? Nothing at all. Philippines have never done anything on these islands. I mean, it's like suddenly getting worked up over the Isle of Wight or something. Yeah, it's causing a bit of a rift because everything does. As I said, this is just absolutely, if everybody calmed down a bit, nobody would give a damn if China built an airstrip on this island. These islands are very, very, very
building islands as well, but I think they just want the oil. I mean, the tragedy is that there is no oil found along the coastline of China, not in the Yellow Sea, not in East China Sea, not in South China Sea. I have myself been involved with drilling 10 oil wells, all dry, not one discovery, a couple of gas, no oil. So they want, they want oil.
If there's oil there, there may be an issue. If there's oil in Antarctica, there may be an issue. If there's oil in the Arctic, there may be an issue. We may have to talk to the Russians. I don't know, but at the moment. So the answer is, I think it's blown. I don't see warfare. Sorry.
Hi, you said you don't like bankers. I wonder what you think about modern politicians, and are there any that
modern politicians?
And are there any that actually impress you?
What do I think about politicians?
Yeah.
Anybody who impresses you?
I am so nauseated. Sorry, I'm a lot of confidence. I cannot stand anything. I'm ashamed of politicians. I'm particularly ashamed when I read in the paper that this great parliament, the father of all parliaments, founded by Edward III, blah, 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 we have people cheating on their expense accounts and doing all this stuff. In my business, a guy cheats on his expense account, he goes straight to jail. Now, if somebody in Nigeria takes $1 million, I could I could live with that. $1 million makes sense. But this stuff of $2,000 for a duck pond and messing around with their houses and renting this and taking that makes me sick. I think they're all career guys. There is not one of them that gives me the feeling that he's in it for his country. They're in it to make money. And now we find that when they leave, they're making even more money doing this. I was in China the other day. I went to see my friend, the head of Sinopec, Chen Yufu. Lovely, lovely guy, just retired at 65. And I said to him, I think you should be on the board of some Western companies and so on and so forth. He said, I'm 65, I've got a pension, 3 years garden leave, I am not allowed to take any civilian job at all. I'd like to pass that to some of the guys in this country.
Last question. All right, okay, quick.
You have witnessed the past glory of Hong Kong, so I would like to know what you see about the future of Hong Kong when we have Shanghai and Pearl River deltas catching up very fast and even replacing the function and position of Hong Kong.
Yeah, that's a big question. I think that Hong Kong has got to be careful. Right now, the visitors from China has just dropped by about 4 million. Where are those 4 million gone? Amazing. They've gone to Japan. They're treated much better in Japan. They're very polite to them in Japan. When they come into the stores and stuff in Hong Kong, the Hong Kong people say, get the hell back. They try to start mumbling, get the hell out of here. It's so bad. They are so rude to them that they've only got themselves to blame. Now, I think that Hong Kong is part of that southern part of China, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and so on. There are 69 million people who live there, integrated and so on. It will become eventually a very sort of important part of China. But it could be that if they go on freaking around, doing, we've got to have independence in the morning and riots and Christ knows, it could be that they drop back. And China, from paying no attention to them, China's got far more issues, far bigger issues than worry about Hong Kong, some students on the street. But if they do get it wrong, Shanghai will be replaced, maybe Beijing and Shanghai, and Hong Kong, 30 years from today, a nice little city on the western, southeast coast of China. Hong Kong's got service industry, everything else is gone. When we were the manufacturers of everything. One shirt in 6 in America was made in Hong Kong.
Okay, quick.
The US elections, what's your view on the main candidates and the implications?
On the what?
On the United States elections.
The US presidential election, Mr. Trump and Mr. Clinton.
Well, it's a follow-on from the previous question. What do I think of politicians? The Americans will get what they deserve. This is democracy. The problem with democracy is that It doesn't work quite as well as people would like it. Maybe there is nothing better. You can have a benign dictatorship like Singapore. It works very, very well. It worked very well indeed. But what happens next if somebody not so well comes along and he, you get a sort of North Korea situation. I used to think the English system was better. Two parties, level off, boom, and they pick their own leader. In America, and then I thought the American system was better. Got two groups, 2 years picking their best man or best woman. They stand off, the two best people, and go together, and the best man or woman in the country is standing at the top of the pile. I've changed my mind, obviously, quite often, but this time, it's, I cannot stand them both. Hillary Clinton drives me mad, and I think she's a deceitful, lying, terrible woman. One of the reasons, I remember she went to somewhere strange like Bulgaria or something, when she was Secretary of State, and she arrived, and she said, when she returned, facing bullets all over the tarmac and running for their lives and all this stuff. Complete, absolute rubbish. She was received terribly well, very grand dinner, no bullets. So the Bulgarians, or whatever it was, were terribly hurt that she came up with a story like that. I'm halfway through the Benghazi incident. Very good read. And when you've read that, bye-bye Mrs. Clinton, and I don't care whether she does her emails on her own personal computer or what she does, one or another, no. Now Trump, you may not know the origin of the word gossip. In days of yore, English politicians would send their men into the pubs to listen. What do the boys want? What are they saying in the pubs? Good things, bad things? What do they want us to do? And so on. Then they came back to the pubs and gave them all the information. That was called go and sip a beer in the pubs. That's the origin of the word gossip. Now Trump is doing exactly that. He is talking exactly the way Americans talk in the bars. Got their beers there. Goddamn Mexicans. What we should do is build a goddamn bar. That's what we should. Yeah. 2 more beers. I'll tell you what, we get them to pay for it. Yeah. Damn good. 3 more beers. Yeah, he's bloody. And so he goes on. And that's Trump. He's got about 10 minutes to start behaving sensibly. But it's him. It's the best of two evils. Obama was elected by 26% of the population. That means 74% of the population did not vote for him. He's the president. We've had some very strange presidents.
All right. Last question. I'm afraid it's got to be a last question.
You're stretching me a little bit, American president.
First of all, thank you so much. You've been thoroughly entertaining. In your lifetime, what is, slightly off topic, what's the best advice that you've been given?
Good question. That's a good, whatever it was, I didn't follow it. I think I've been given all that stuff.
Has your wife given you suggestions?
Work hard and all this. I ran away from school when I was 18. Didn't do my A-levels, and came back, worked in an iron foundry, didn't like it very much. I liked the chairman's daughter, married her. I wasn't given advice on that. I married her. She's sitting over there.
And has she given you any good advice?
She's given me a bit of advice over time. I don't think I've taken that either. Ran away to the Foreign Legion, always on the run, but good people on the way, usually saying, why don't you do this, why don't you do that? Really, really good advice.
But I think what defines your life also is not only your mental dexterity, but your physical dexterity. I mean, you go...
I'll answer the question by telling you what I tell young people today. Do not follow where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. Okay?
Brilliant.